All right, so here we are today. We're doing Artist Spotlight. We have Quince here, and it's Mikkel, how do you pronounce the last name?
Myrick.
Myrick.
Yes.
Mikkel Myrick. I will get it right.
No
All right,
worries.
so we're going to play a little Mario Kart today while we talk a little bit about what Quince does. What do you prefer? Do you prefer 50cc? I actually never knew what the cc meant until later.
Is it the length of the track?
I think it's actually how fast your car goes.
Okay.
I could be
Easier
wrong to
ones.
operate, so
Okay.
if I need to do that in the middle of this, I will. Let's see if it's
I think it's the.
the right button. Oh, see, they make it simple.
Yep.
And then to use an item, it's... I don't know what it is. Oh, it's the left button here.
Okay.
Here, hold on a second. Okay. You have the hang of it?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's like riding a bike.
So, let's talk about you while we play this then.
Let's do it.
Where did you grow up?
I moved to Central New York from Tampa Bay, Florida when I was a kid.
Gotcha.
So spent a lot of time in Central New York, and then from there moved to the Ithaca area for some time
Okay.
before coming up here.
Nice. Do you ever miss Tampa?
No, nah, I don't really have too many fond memories. Hence why we moved all the way, across the country. But a lot of my father's family is from down that way,
Yeah.
and my mother's family's from here. So,
Okay.
from New York.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't. I've got little kid memories of it. You know what I mean?
Yep. So now you are currently you're on Tunes 925. You've been
Yeah.
there for like a year-ish?
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. Just over a year.
Yep. And you started hosting, you have your own, your show is called, what's your show called again?
So, in the mix with Quince.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's just to play on being able to, because Tunes plays a little bit of everything.
Yep.
And so it's nice to be able to kind of like put my own style, to it,
Yep.
which is awesome that they were open to. So yeah, we called it In the Mix.
Nice. And then part of your show on Thursdays,
Yeah.
you've put in local legends, right?
Local Legends, Thursdays at 3:15, playing the best in upstate and local music, for sure.
That's right. You go, and so local legends, you take some artists that are around here. They could be in like northern New York, but you also go as far as like Binghamton and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's a loose terminology on upstate.
Yeah.
It's
Upstate means probably not New York City.
just not New York City. Anytime people from anywhere else in the U.S., when you say New York, that's what they think of New York City. And then I'm just trying to change that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot else going on. There's a lot of other talented people, and up and coming businesses, stuff like that I just want to shed a light on, which is kind of congruent with the idea and the premise of Hold On Upstate. So
Yeah.
this is something that we've always been pushing for.
Yeah. And so you've been there for a year. Do you remember when you started Local Legends?
Yeah, April 1st.
April 1st.
April
So
1st.
it was a joke.
I know.
Well, it's almost been a full year though.
Yeah, it's I think it really was on right on April 1st. And that's right after my birthday too. So it was all felt like one big celebration at the time. But that's when everything kind of fell right into place for me.
Yeah.
And that opportunity opened up.
So, and just so everybody knows, you just got a Switch yesterday, so this is like his first time really going through this.
I mean, everybody's played Mario Kart before, but the controllers are just so small.
Yeah, they barely fit in your hands. So if you see him getting 9th place, that's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate the disclaimer. It's that ink, man. As soon as I get hit with the ink, all is lost.
Did you play much Mario Kart or anything as a kid or anything like that?
No, it was probably in college.
Yeah.
We would do Mario Kart, and then you had to drink before you were past them. So it was like a group effort thing, but it was more party
Yep.
atmosphere. So I'm no expert by any means, but It's still fun.
I have heard of the Mario Kart drinking game.
Yes, yes. That was my introduction to it.
So where did you go to college then?
SUNY Cortland.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I've gone to college a couple different places. SUNY Cortland. I've gone out to Utica. And of course, once I was up here, kind of getting settled, I went back, got my associates of business over at JCC.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you like any preference over any of those schools?
No, I mean, school is school, but my mindset wasn't there. I went to Cortland to play sports.
Okay.
I enjoy. I was an athlete before.
I did not realize that.
Anything else, yeah, to play football, and then I got there for football. And the dude's like, yeah. Well, what he told me to do, he's like, I want you to be ready for the football season. So I want you to run track your senior year in high school. And it was the first time I ever ran track, and it sucks because I was good at it.
Yeah.
And I hate running.
Yeah.
But I could jump, and so when I got to campus, he's like, I didn't know you were gonna actually be good. He's like, I want you to do indoor instead. He's like, you're gonna, I think you're gonna have much more success earlier on.
Yeah.
Being a freshman. So he kind of fooled me into it, but I did that also in Utica. I was jumping and actually won a national championship. And it was a junior college, but nonetheless,
Oh, wow.
something I just never saw coming. It was, very, very cool memory.
Yeah, that's great. I did not realize that sports was a big thing.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so I guess that brings us to, backtracking to you eventually, hip hop is a big part of your life now.
Sure.
And when did that start for you?
Just as far as hip hop and music being a part of my life?
Or just, well, yeah, so when did you first get inspired, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I come from I've got people in my family very musical. Grandfather was a musician, music teacher, had several bands, up until the day he passed even. So I guess it was always in the background, and that sort of, the spirit of art and music was always around, I guess. But I wasn't really focused on it until I had to be, until it was, you see that flip?
I missed it.
Yeah. There was a certain point in which I had to figure out what it was I was doing, because I went to school, I was going for phys ed.
Yeah.
And that was just because, again, I was 17, I'm like, oh, I guess I'll just do sports forever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once that couldn't keep my attention,
Yeah.
and I wasn't doing well in school, I would never really even go. A lot of other things kind of, drew that sort of attention from me. But I had to really figure out what it was that motivated me on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it wasn't that it was music just off the tip, but it was more of a lot of self-reflection and better understanding, who I am and what drives me. The sort of company I want to keep, and all of these other things that you kind of got to dig out your soul with. And music just became a way for me to better communicate that to myself.
Yeah.
Just writing in general. So it was writing before it was ever music, and I was able to use those tools also in a musical setting.
So what do you mean by writing?
Writing, I was studying on my own,
Yeah.
and I was writing, and I was really trying to, all this stuff that school wasn't bringing out of me.
Yeah.
I had to find what would keep me focused, keep me wanting to be better, because I was really just going with the flow.
Yeah.
For a really long time, and I don't think that it wasn't doing me any good. There was no real future to that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you did a lot of writing, and then eventually that transferred into music.
Yeah. Well, yes, it did, because it was just a lot of writing, and music was one of those things that I could sit down and I was making beats, chopping up samples and
Yeah.
putting that sort of stuff together, because for me it was like this certain energy I could get lost in.
Yeah.
That was still seemed like it was productive use of my time.
Yep.
and things like that. So I was trying to like find all these different aspects of life that I enjoyed and put it together all in one thing. So it was a slow grind, slow build up. And even at that time when I was making beats and things like that, it never was I like, yeah, this will be what it is. It was more just about like self-care and having a craft and having something that I could see the progress at, because it kind of gave me that faith in the process in general, in that self-growth. So, and from there, just being, the work that was put in ends up creating opportunity. And I just took advantage of the opportunities at hand, and one thing led to another, man. And it's just like we were off.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always think about like writing in general and writing anything. Like sometimes you write and you write with the purpose of an audience eventually seeing it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't always matter if an audience ever sees it. There's still a benefit to writing something, even if something terrible that you wrote.
Yeah.
There's still some benefit there. It's like people always feel like there needs to be some kind of productivity to something,
Yeah.
Whereas at the end of the day, it's like, well, why do we read books? You know what I mean? Why do we read like fiction books? You know what I mean? Well,
Right.
It's really just to relax our brain. Well, why do we do other things? You can do something not with the idea that it has to be productive at the end of the day.
Yeah, and and there is a big difference in writing for self and writing for others, because you tend to like curb yourself.
Yeah.
And I've noticed this in my music looking back, because prior to when I had any sort of crowd and I was really writing from, from wherever, from the space in which it was just for me, I was a lot more vulnerable, and then it was the music was more raw, and I could see a certain time in which it became more defensive. Once I had a crowd, because I'm like, oh, well, I can't say that. I don't want to offend this and that, or maybe something about a relationship. You're like, man, I don't want to put us out there. So so that was always a interesting transition to go through, because there was a certain point where where I almost fell out of love with it, because I was curbing myself so much that it didn't have the same pull.
Yeah.
It didn't have the same gravity to it. So I've been learning to balance that a little bit better, and find that almost that vulnerability again.
Yep.
And which is exciting, I think, is all it is.
That's great. So we're talking about, just writing in general and why you write.
Yeah.
And the idea of not writing for an audience, I think, is actually really a kind of a cool thing that people don't think about, because you always, as a person who's not a performer, you only see the things that were written for an audience,
Yeah.
So what are these things that are not written for audiences' eyes, and why are they written?
Yeah. And it's more so, there we go. It's more so like day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
Almost journaling, I'm not even writing raps or writing, music. Doesn't have to be in any sort of style or prose. It's just for the sake of getting words and thoughts down on paper, and for the sake of, because I think we walk around all day with so many incomplete thoughts. And I think writing is one of the best ways to be able to finish a thought, from start to finish. And that's a game changer too, because I think those full thoughts add to perspective in general. So
That's really profound. I mean, it's like more so than just like writing. Like sometimes I have to, if I don't write something down, I'm gonna forget it. But also, if you just don't complete, there's all these thoughts that you don't complete, especially those who struggle with like ADHD and stuff like that.
Exactly. Oh yeah, I had all that stuff.
So all these thoughts, and then you can actually write them down. You can complete them.
Right. And and you see what one's needed. It's not like every thought that crosses your mind needs to be a complete thought, but it does help you differentiate from the ones and from the things in life that need to be focused on.
Yeah, it helps you figure out kind of what's important. When I was in school, for instance, they would have us at college. They would have us write things, at the beginning of class,
Uh-huh.
and it was so weird because they would just be like, just write, and I'm like, write what? They're like, just write, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, and so I just would write the stupidest stuff, like, hey, I'm writing now, this is really cool.
Right.
And you start to realize that it warmed you up to the rest of the class,
Yeah.
but it also got your thoughts out there and out of the way, and not out of the way, but on some place where you could see it, you know?
Right. Right.
But yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool that a lot of, that writing is the biggest influence to what you do. Is that kind of the case with a lot of hip hop? Because as an original person, I write more, I don't write that many words, honestly. I write words, but, they all have, it's more simple, but.
I don't know. I guess I can only speak for myself, but as far as my understanding of hip hop and why I think I gravitated to it is because it was just one of those things where, you hear all these stories of from nothing to something. In hip hop, unlike say being a musician, like a utilizing an instrument, like if you don't have these things, if you don't grow up with these things, if you can't afford these things, that still doesn't stop you from crafting something, crafting these thoughts, crafting your voice in a way that it becomes an instrument, So I always appreciated that, and I always that always resonated with me, not having something and still being able to make the best out of a situation or maybe the skill set that you have.
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't think I've ever thought about like hip hop in that way, because it's like you're right. We were with Harmony. We were looking up how much a tuba cost the other day, for instance.
Right.
It was $6,000 to $12,000, and I'm like, who can afford that? So like, hip hop is a way to get into the performing arts in general, without having to spend $12,000. Because that obviously, so it's a way for the underprivileged to be able to get there. Whereas so that's cool.
And I always, so even when it came to, think about how the break beats when they were first starting, and they used a lot of sampling, same thing. Maybe they didn't have the instruments, maybe they didn't have the education and the knowledge on how to use the instrument, but they could hear it, and the fact that there is an art to the sound, to you recognizing a certain vibration, it's like, yeah, I could put this and this together, or rearrange it in this way in which it creates something different. That I'm like, okay, there's more to being a musician than just what you can physically do.
Yeah.
There's an ear for it, there's an eye to it, there's all these different intangibles that people can have, that they can express to kind of get their voice out there.
Yep. And like, because we live in a day, so like, years ago, you didn't really have the capacity to basically create like an orchestra or like a band sound without having the orchestra or the band there.
Right.
And of course, now we live in a day and age where you can do that at a very low cost, replicate almost an orchestra sound.
Right.
Or replicate a band, replicate the beats that you need, anything that you need can be replicated, so you can be a composer, which I've always, it's been frustrating it frustrates musicians. And I don't think that it's right that it does, but it always does. It frustrates musicians because it's like, they're like, oh, I spend all my life, doing this craft, and some guy on a computer can, do the same thing, but without having to actually perfect the technique of the craft,
Yeah, I can see that. Though, when it comes down to it, live, I don't think there's a human feel to it.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always
that you can't necessarily match.
Yeah, there is a humanize button in my software, but I don't think it does quite what all it does is it just shifts everything a little bit.
Gotcha.
No, I agree. I think that there's always a place. I don't think that it necessarily makes sense. That argument doesn't really make sense to me, because I actually think that it's great that you're able to, instead of a privileged person being able to create, anybody can create.
Right. Right. And and I think that's been a part of my, I don't know if I want to use the word mission, but a part of what motivates me is all of this it brings me such joy on a daily basis, and continually, from the people I meet, from the things I get to experience, whether it's shows or these community events. But to be able to communicate the fact that like I didn't have any of it, you know what I mean? Like all this was just like work for and really better understanding yourself and applying yourself in certain ways. Like, damn, anybody could be doing this. You know, I think everybody has something to offer in that way with a little self-focus and, you know, reflectiveness and just self-awareness. That I think that is the coolest part. I'm certainly not the first individual to go through something like this.
Right.
But nonetheless, you know, I want to continue to push that concept of the idea that we all have something to add. We all have something to say.
Yeah. Even if you're not going to say it to someone.
Right.
Just say it.
Sure.
No, that's great. And that kind of transitions into a little bit. So now you're not only with Tunes 925, but you started an organization called Hold Down Upstate.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah. Hold On Upstate was just something, it was an opportunity at the time when I came to the area and started making music that got us into venues. You know, it was hip hop based, it was like rap and rock, so it was unique. And we were able to mix in with a lot of what was going on in the area, and which was heavier at the time. You know, at least like the original scene, it was like, you know, heavy music, heavy rock.
Yep.
And you know, it's what it is, and so it was dope.
Yep.
Mixing up with that, and so, but there was no other hip hop. So it started as a kind of a foundation or a platform for artists to get together. And at first, it was hip hop artists who didn't necessarily have a voice individually, to get together and work together and kind of like formulate, you know, start putting together this scene. And it grew from there to all musicians, you know, largely people with like original aspirations, you know, original style music.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of them have to fight for their voices to be heard, their original voices to be heard. A lot of people have great voices. A lot of people, you know, crush covers and stuff like that. And I think it's certainly was easier to get into a venue doing just covers, but for them to start mixing in their originals, it was easier to be done when the artists were working together and talking and communicating together, and putting shows together. And then, you know, we would go to the venue and say, hey, we already got the show, we already got the crowd, we just need the space.
Yeah.
And from there, it grew to just more and more people being able to work together behind the scenes to create something that wasn't there before, and to shine a light on whether it's musicians or painters and artists or small business owners, all these people that you know, put their life into their work and want to just be able to reach more people.
Yeah. And it's the difference between, you know, like the cover band and the original band is interesting, and how they have to function differently. Like there's a little bit more of a competitive vibe when you're a cover band. You have to be out there, you're entertaining, and you're there to basically make a little bit of money to do your craft, right?
Yes. Yep.
The original vibe, and at least I feel like the way that it needs to function, is that you have to work together on it. It's not competitive. It's because, you know, when somebody goes to listen to an original song, I mean, if they've never heard you before, they can probably only take about 3 songs, to be honest, before they're like, okay, it's tough for my ears to take anymore, or to differentiate it anymore.
Gotcha.
So like, I always feel like the original shows are really cool, and the one that you and Joey worked on for Empire Square was great because you put all these people, they played a couple songs, you know, they were different from each other, and so every single one was just very entertaining and never got stale. Of course, cover band can get stale too, mind you, but original music just has a little bit more of a chance of getting not stale to the ears, but the same.
Right, if you don't have the palate for it.
Yeah.
And you know, and with covers, so it's like the same reason people go to the same bar. There's a nostalgia to it. They have the same, you know, you go to the same bar, you got the same jukebox, a lot of the same people, same conversations. There's a comfort to it, and I think it's the same thing with cover music. People like it, you know, whether they're, you know, sometimes they're just half listening or maybe it's on in the background. There's a comfort to it, there's a nostalgia to it, and a familiarity. And you're right, when it comes to original music, that familiarity is lacking. But there's also, for me, an excitement to that, because, you know, these cover tracks they're original music.
Yeah.
You know, you know.
My father-in-law literally said that the other day. He's like, everything you play is original music. Somebody, at some point in time.
Right. But you know, it reached a certain level or reached enough people and to where it's now familiar. So just the thought of people playing original music out here to the point where it brings that familiarity or it brings that nostalgia. I think that's the goal. You know, I think that's what, you know, kind of, I mean, not to go too grand wild, but like that's history.
Yeah.
That's history for sure.
And you know, like things like Local Legends helps with that too, because you're playing people's recorded music and people are like, okay, they get a little bit of a feel for that. And then you have the Spotify list. So if you just listen to the Spotify list every once in a while, you know, put on a couple songs, maybe go back to the songs you're used to again and come back to the Spotify list, keep going through that and then see that artist play. Like I get excited to see like Joey Collins. There's a couple songs that I really like when he says he's gonna play them. And I'm like, oh, I love this song. It's just, you know, the lyrics speak to me. I get it now. Like there was one song that I liked from the beginning, but then I liked it even more as I started to realize what he was saying in the chorus. It's like that's even more profound than I thought. But it's just like you just gotta. The only way to do it is to just keep making it familiar to people.
Yes. Yes. No. Great point. Great point. Yeah, and just, I mean, people just in general just interest me in that way. We've all got so many different layers to us.
Yeah.
You know, because you can have a conversation with, say, Joey, you know, about whatever you like. And then on the side, you're listening to the music, and like you said, you might have heard it a couple times, but maybe on the third time around, you're hearing something different now. You're like, damn, I didn't even, you know, I didn't even know that existed before. To where, I mean, and you know, and I don't want to keep, I guess I'm not here to compare covers to originals, because even in a set that I'm building right now, you know, putting some new music together, and I'm adding covers on with it right now because it accentuates, for me, it accentuates the show, and it accentuates a lot of the original and vice versa.
Yep. Plus you often do it your own way too.
Sure, exactly.
So it's familiar, everybody knows how it sounds, but you're not just playing a track back to them.
Right, exactly. Because I was, you know, like, but say if Joey only did covers, if he only did covers, then you wouldn't know any layers to him. You know, you wouldn't know the depth to the individual.
Yep.
Which would be a disservice, I think, to that artist.
Yep, that makes sense.